Good day everyone, my name is Orf, and thanks for stopping by. Now, it seems like a lot of you kind of vibed with my review of Clancy, and that's awesome. However, we're not done yet, because with Clancy being 21 Pilots' technically 7th full-length album, and also serving as the conclusion of the entire sort of trench narrative that we've been going with for so long now, to me it seems like the perfect time to hit up a tier list. So let's do it. Now, it goes without saying that this is just my opinion, and I will be trying to explain all of my reasoning as best I can. I'll be trying to remove myself from their live shows and their music videos and just be looking at the music on here. And so without further ado, let's kick things off with sort of the oddball in their discography, 21 Pilots' self-titled record. So to me, this one definitely sounds the most different from any other 21 Pilots record that we have to date. And let's just get this out of the way, man. This thing does not make you feel good. This makes me very sad. And as a result, it's something I listen to maybe a little bit less than the other records. But here's the thing. Let's say another musical artist released an album like this, where the constant theme pretty much throughout the entire record is focused on just mental health being in the dumps and suicide contemplation. Of course, you have some other references thrown in here relating to religion and aging, but for the most part, this album, it really just is about somebody's fight in their own head. While there are probably a lot of other artists that would sort of crumble under doing this same theme for an entire record, I think in the case of 21 Pilots, despite this entire record carrying basically the same theme and the instrumentation really not changing much either, I think they made the most out of what they had on this album. And I think it's crazy how I can actually listen to this record all the way through without getting bored, despite me sort of expecting that feeling. And again, it does not make me feel good to listen to it. However, despite all of the theatrical elements that came with 21 Pilots' later albums, the music videos, the narrative, the live shows, if we're just focusing on music, for some reason, I actually still believe that 21 Pilots' self-titled record is actually the one that I could see most in, say, a theatrical setting. I think this album puts an entire movie in my head, and more effectively than a few of the albums that come after this. And with that said, after thinking about it a lot, I actually think I need to put the self-titled record in the A category. Now, it's definitely not perfect because, yes, towards the end of the album, I do get a little bit burnt out. What I'm surprised by is just how burnt out I am is not as much as I would expect. Yeah. All right, let's move on to Regional at Best. Easily the most difficult album to rank for me in the past. I thought about this one a lot, and I kind of see this album in sort of two ways. Let me explain. In one way, I see Regional at Best exactly as is, taking the tracks at face value, acknowledging that this is the true follow-up to the self-titled 21 Pilots record. You know, what you see is what you get. However, in my mind, I always think about what Regional at Best could have been. So if you were to somehow combine all the tracks on Regional at Best that are only on this record and none other, with the updated versions of tracks like Ode to Sleep, Car Radio, Trees, everything that was on Vessel, and if you were to cut and paste these two records and sort of combine them into like a super album with only the best versions of the Vessel tracks, then Regional at Best would easily be an S tier album for me. But I just can't do that for this tier list. I need to look at this album objectively. And yeah, I have to say, while I still find there to be great elements on here, the versions of the Vessel tracks are just a little bit lacking for me. I got into this group during the beginning of the Blurry Face era, then went back and listened to Vessel, totally fell in love with some of the tracks. And between the Blurry Face and Trench release, one day I found out that Regional at Best existed. And it was like finding gold, because tracks like Slowtown and Forest and Kitchen Sink and Lovely, it blew my mind that I had never heard these before and that they weren't on some record on Spotify. But since I had already listened to Vessel, listened to the updated versions of those tracks, hearing them on here, they'll just always be lacking in my eyes. So I think it's mainly because of my origins with this group that I'm gonna put Regional at Best in the B category. Again, I could see this as an A or an S if it was the super album that I see in my head, but in real life, it's just not. But of course, I salute Regional at Best. Moving on, let's get into Vessel. And now that I think about it, alternatively, you could totally cut... What are you doing? Yeah. Come to think of it, if you could alternatively take the songs on Vessel that I don't like and replace them with songs from Regional at Best that I do like, you would also have an S tier album here. Much like another album on this list, it starts strong and it ends strong. Car Radio, Trees, Ode to Sleep, these are some of my favorite 21 Pilots songs, period. But I would say a good 30 to 35% of this album is stuff that I never revisit. And it's mainly those 4 songs. Holding On to You hasn't aged amazingly either, and I could even say the same thing for Guns for Hands. But again, you got some of my biggest hits from this group on this album. In my eyes, those two things kind of cancel each other out. I'm actually pretty comfortable putting Vessel in the B category. Maybe leaning towards a B- as far as the album goes, but I can't deny the quality of most of the tracks on here. And moving on, just like a lot of people, Blurry Face is the album that actually got me into this group. And while I think Blurry Face was a fantastic product of its time, I don't think this album has aged as well as any other 21 Pilots album. I think it was borderline revolutionary for pop music at this time period. And this is the other one that, like I said on Vessel, starts fantastically and ends fantastically. Heavy Dirty Soul is one of the best album openers I can think of, and Goner is one of the best album closers I can think of. But I think the big difference between this one and Vessel is that the percentage of songs on Blurry Face that I don't really revisit is a little bit higher. And while it's awesome that this album kicked off the narrative that was continuous until last week, Blurry Face over time went from being an A tier album to a B tier, probably to a C+ for me. By 21 Pilots standards, not on the top or not on the bottom, just a perfectly average one that I only revisit occasionally. And here we go, here's the big boy coming up next. We have Trench. And if you saw my review of Clancy, you already know how I feel about Trench. Actually, the biggest challenge for me was deciding should it go in the A category or the S category. And you know, after thinking about it for a while, it feels like an S tier album should be an album with no skips, something that you can listen to from front to back and feel like there were no low points that warranted you moving past them. So after listening to it again, is Trench that album that you don't have any skips on? And actually my answer is yes. Even my least favorite tracks, which have to be Smithereens and Cut My Lip, are still tracks that I do not want to skip. The ambient and ominous production on Trench, the instrumentation, the writing, the lyrics, you've probably heard it before, but it's all here. And if this isn't the best 21 Pilots album, I don't know what is. And what more can I say about Trench? It's on the top. Moving onward though, now we have Scaled and Icy. And this is one that I also had to revisit for this tier list. While I don't think it's a complete failure, D is perfect for this album because man, that percentage of songs that I never revisit is just at its highest on this album. Not only that, but it just left such a bad taste in my mouth for this album to come right after Trench. The energy was turned down, the lyrical skill was turned down, everything just went down. And I'm kind of tired of complaining about that because, you know, it's been out for years at this point. But Scaled and Icy gave me the impression that 21 Pilots made their magnum opus and then the next album after would kill the band. And I'm glad to say that that's not true, but it gave me this feeling for a while until we heard Overcompensate from the Clancy record. And I've taken a few more times to listen to this album since that review, and I still do believe that this is a good album. This one is one of the hardest for me to rank because I really do think it sits right here between a B and an A. I guess since I put an A- in the review, I'll keep it here for now, but I can say still that this album is safely above average, and the return to the Trench sound, while not as impactful as Trench itself, was refreshing while also doing enough different for Clancy to stand on its own. And yeah, there's the 21 Pilots tier list. So here's my opinion, but I'd love to hear yours. Throw it in the comments. I will read all of them, I promise. I think it's time to take a little break from 21 Pilots, so in the next video, we'll be looking at something different. But with that said, I hope you all have a fantastic evening, stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.